Let me bring in two voices here. Retired Lieutenant General Mark Hertling and CNN military analyst and former commanding general for the Europe and 7th Army. Also here, David Gartenstein-Ross, founder for Defense of Democracy. So, gentlemen, welcome to both of you. And General Hertling, I want to get right into what we just heard from this Pentagon briefing that these ISIS militants are now apparently wearing Iraqi uniforms as they're encroaching upon this airbase. My question would be, where did they get them? And what does this tell you about what they're capable of?
Well, I'd ask to temper the language a little bit, Brooke, because al-Baghdadi, the town that we're talking about, is a little mud hut village along the Euphrates River. It is close to Al-Assad Air Base, which is a sprawling complex, and Iraqi police or Iraqi army uniforms are relatively easy to get even on local markets. They're not that distinctive. And I think the very fact that they were attempting to gain access to the base through one of the entrances, and there are multiple entrances to Al-Assad, I've been there several times, shows me that they are attempting to do some things. This could be the equivalent of a sleeper cell raising up out of the town of al-Baghdadi. But it's typical of the kind of tactics they will use to try and sneak on a base. The fact that 8 of them had what we assume to be suicide vests, it's a normal tactic of a lot of terrorist groups that, hey, do not get captured. Attempt your attack, and if someone counters you, take out as many of the infidels as you possibly can. But again, what I'd say is for the Marines on this base, they are secure. Al-Assad had been attacked multiple times with rockets and mortars, even during the time where there were tens of thousands of U.S. forces there. And the rockets that are launched there aren't launched from a system that will be accurate in fire. The mortar fire that's toward the base will not come anywhere near the complexes where the Americans are. And I think the Americans on the base are relatively safe, but there are things that you need to do to ensure better security.
Two things. Let me follow up with you, General. One being, what would the vetting be like, I guess, at these gates, whether it's on behalf of the Iraqis or on behalf of the U.S. in terms of gaining access? And two, you say they would not be within range, being threatened by any kind of mortars. Just confirming that from you.
Well, I am confirming that they might be within range.
Might be within range.
Well, at the outer perimeters of the base. But you're talking about a base, Brooke, that's about 5 miles wide by about 3 miles long. It's very difficult to aim mortar fire at a particular place from that kind of distance unless you have an observer. The rockets are arbitrarily sent, usually off of some kind of handmade rail, and they don't strike targets very accurately. The vetting at the gates, the Iraqi soldiers that are there have been taught, and there's usually a serpentine complex to get in the base. They have overwatch. It's difficult because sometimes until you get on a person and you see what they have, it's difficult to detect whether or not they have suicide vests or not. But there is a procedure that someone will go through in order to get onto the base. So most of the time, it's very difficult to enter a sprawling base like this without being checked on in multiple approaches.
Okay. David, to you, it's interesting hearing the general talk about al-Baghdadi as this mud hut of a village along the Euphrates here, but we do know that members of these ISIS militants have managed to advance, and they've used some pretty cowardly tactics because in these communities, or in this part of Iraq, they're targeting children, they're targeting the elderly, again, suicide bombings. What does it tell you about the capability of this particular group?
That's an excellent question. I don't think this tells us a great deal about their capability. My argument for some time is that ISIS has been on a downward spiral. Not that they're going to go away. They have a pretty strong foothold in eastern Syria, but they've lost a lot of territory. Although one thing I've explicitly said since the beginning of January is that they could make gains in Anbar province. There are multiple reasons they'd want to do that, and one of them is precisely what we're talking about, which is that they want to attack the Al-Assad air base. Given that they're losing ground right now, one of their most important plays is to try to send some sort of signal that the United States needs to get out of Iraq, and Al-Assad is the most obvious target to try to do that. They've launched previously a fairly major attack on Al-Assad. We haven't had anything that major this time around. But taking the town of al-Baghdadi is one step along the route to trying to attack al-Assad. And I agree with General Hertling that we shouldn't overstate what al-Baghdadi is. I mean, there's other much larger cities in Anbar province which they could try to overrun as well. But all of this is in context of al-Baghdadi not being a major strategic advance for them. Instead, the biggest thing that they gain is the symbol of being closer to al-Assad rather than this being a major victory.
That's precisely what it is. So no overstating this mud hut of a town, but it is strategically, geographically placed 9 miles from this huge get that they have their eyes on very clearly. Lieutenant General Mark Hertling and David Gartenstein-Ross, thank you both very, very much.